Good day and good evening, and welcome to Relic Farm and Talk with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. So, if you know how we do walk and talk, it's not that different. The big difference is that I will be working on books in the background instead of walking. Everybody put your hands in the air for books. That's the spirit, Vashed. Hey, books! Now, with that said, hey Talaba, hey Kaj, hey Urna, hey Naomi, hey Dan, hey Ilana, hey Agent Monica, hey Silly, hey Shaq, hey Darit, hey Procrastinauts, hey Aradil, hey Vashed, hey Kupamana, and hey Eaterit, and hey Master. Hope you're all doing very well. Yeah, that's basically the plan. We're not gonna be like speed running it, because then it'll quickly become like I can't actually, you know, read chat while also hurrying through things. So we'll take it pretty casual. I'll be like checking the fate spawns if there's nothing there. Do a dungeon maybe. Check again. Do a dungeon. Check again. Do a dungeon. Check again. Clear enemies in a zone. Things like that. Just slow progging through it all, and then we'll see how many books, if any, we clear. Hopefully one. We have a few hours. And I've made sure to have plenty of poetics in case we magically do like 13 books. We'll do dungeons unsynced or synced. I'll do them unsynced. Just to hurry. In fact, let me just do this so I have it in order. Also, 8 demon to remember. I hope you're doing well. I just started grinding all 9 remaining sets of 9 books last week. Almost done my first set already. Yeah, I'm also... this is technically my first of the last sets. I have all of the remaining relics at that stage. You might be wondering why. And that's basically the deal. And also, yes, it is also very hot in here. Very fun. Say Nox, hope you're doing well, since I do not feel like hunting fates today. Yeah, don't. We're just gonna take it very, very casual, relaxed, and see if we find anything, and then we'll get there when we get there. Why? Because bookstep. Isn't that the one? Oh, yes, that is actually one of the things we need. I'm also hanging out on Ravana, should you feel like hanging out with me. But, given that I'll be rushing around a lot more, I can see what might be less appealing to do that. That said, we're still just, you know, casual hangout talk. If you have anything you would like to talk about, maybe something aside from the melty weather, then, you know, feel free to bring it up. Something that could... It despawned just as I arrived! Amazing start! Wow, that's amazing. Also, Yamished and Asymmetricorn and Rust. Hope you're doing well. It would have been amazing if that one said like 30 seconds. Hey, Haunted Mask. You can really feel, you can really taste the latency. Really feel it in the air tonight. Metricon says, we were talking about how penetration from Reaping City worked last week. And I don't know if anyone else tested it, but I got it in roulette, so I got 1 data point. Hey! If you point perpendicularly from the boss, you're still pushed out towards the edge of the arena, so it's not pushing in the way you're facing, but either directly towards or away from the boss. Well, thank you. That is as good a test as we could possibly need. In these kinds of things, I don't think we need more than just the 1 data point. So thank you so much. That was very effective. Also, Duff and Crab Galaxy and Robert. Hope you're doing well. Which data center is Ravana? Ravana is the Oceanic data center, so everyone can visit. Hang out with me. But as I said, there's maybe not like a huge motivation to do that, since I'll be like speeding around the place like this. Oh. Sorry about that, check. Giant Seps. Where is it that one is? Giant Seps is here, right? Is it here? I think so. Is it up here? I believe it's one of those that just spawn in, so it's not here. Enjoy work, Vasht! Oh, let's check. The probability that it's back is incredibly small. Oh, Riley's here. Except should be close to Stone Vigil. Huh. that moment when like, oh, there. Nope, that's Selvatol. There. That's Stone Vigil. So I will simply fly over to where Enmity of my enemy spawns, and then we hop into a dungeon. That is very fantastic, Ace Metricon, and I'll trust that you did it right. But that is exactly it. That was kind of the problem we ran into, right? Is that it's a piece of information that, you know, it doesn't really matter for anyone. It's like, okay, so what if you could shoot yourself sideways with a mechanic? Why would you do that? So it doesn't do anything, right? Which it makes sense why no one would have gone to check it, because the only time it would come up is us talking about it in passing, right? And it's also inconvenient to test. Like that is actually like a very good example of like the classic type of things that are the most likely to spawn myths, as I might have mentioned in my Mythbuster series in the past. That things that don't really matter and are like on top of that inconvenient to test. That's where you'll get myths, because it's very easy to just claim that something works a specific way, and then it's really hard to actually, you know, test if it's true, and no one cares enough to actually check it. So Bundy and Kawaki, hope you're doing well, and thank you for the resub, Bundy. Very nice. Glorp indeed. But it's like some of the classics are just things that, like, oh well, to test this you need like 3 friends. That's one of the easiest ones to get a myth. And the only thing like left to really make it pop is if it's not something that really changes anything. Like it only requires 2 players to do it, but an example is like how widespread the suggestion that the dance partner doesn't stack between 2 dancers was. I don't think it's as bad anymore. But it's a thing that, like, if you're in a situation... Did you know hitting a positional has a sound effect? I've heard of that one. I feel like it was that we tested, and it seemed like if there really was a sound, it's not all jobs that have sound effects or positionals, but I also remember not testing it that much. It might be really subtle. Exactly, Haunted Mask. That's usually the joke that happens. You're like, oh, well, all you need to test that is like a couple friends. And they're like, wow, lucky you with friends, right? But you see, the thing is, the dance partner thing is like 2 dancers partnering the same person does not work. And that leads to 1 on the target person. Whereas 2 dancers partnering each other does stack. Which does change some things. Oh, I was just about to check, Shaq. But the reason why it would be unlikely to actually... Oh, it's gonna be gone before I make it. The reason why it is so common... or the reason why it's something that people don't really go and check, don't care for, is like, if you're doing content where this detail matters, then you're not bringing 2 dancers. Simple. Like, any situation where this level of optimization matters, you're not bringing 2 dancers. So no one cares whether they stack or not. Not enough to go and test it, just for that. But it is very easy to make the claim and then just not go and check and just go, well, it would make sense if it did this. And to be fair, based on how Final Fantasy XIV works, like most logic in the game, it makes perfect sense that Dan's partner doesn't stack at all. Exactly, Wolfkin. And in a random dungeon, like roulette dungeon, it doesn't matter. Like, so what? Okay, you're losing a bit of damage. Oh, woe is me. The duty will be a minute longer, guys. What is a small lizard to do? Naomi says, but what if you're doing content where it would matter, but you have 2 people who would only want to play dancer? Then you unfortunately are in the very sad reality of needing to have them face reality and accept that that's not how the game works. Like, it's pretty funny. Like, I can't really think of a good example right now. But there's a lot of these, like, oh, this game is, this thing is poorly designed because you're forced to, like, play a specific job or role or something or character for the party to work. And it's like, yes. I mean, you're welcome to go 5 healers or something. Like, if the game allows it, you're welcome to do that. But it's specifically designed so that you have to, like, split the responsibilities. That's how team games work. Things like that. And similarly, some games make the stipulation that, no, actually, only one person can be the dancer. You know, a little bit like that South Park episode with World of Warcraft. I am the dwarf! And it doesn't make sense because there could be multiple dwarfs, as was clearly pointed out by Butters, but... sometimes the game design is you get one of each, and you just have to choose who's who, and that's how it works. Oh, Naomi, I know that it wouldn't work. And I know that it wouldn't, I know that you know that it wouldn't work. That's why I'm saying I can't come up with a better suggestion than just, like, now you have a social problem instead of a mechanical problem. That's basically the end result of that situation. Natorian! And Echo Dance, and Alice. But you're right, Naomi. If you were in the situation that you actually do want to have both players, and you do want to accommodate that they want to both play Dancer, then the best you could do, you know, would be sit down and try to math out, okay, who do they partner then? It's just... based on what I've seen, it's like, I feel like the kind of player that would be interested in doing hard content where this problem, as we're talking about, actually matters, would probably not, like, if the deal breaker is, well, if I can't play Dancer, if we can't both play Dancer, then there's no game. Then I have a feeling that there's a possibility that they're not they're not interested enough, or they're not interested enough, or they or if they are interested enough, it's perfectly possible that what would happen is that it, like, if you can't even, like, if the team can't, like, agree on something to make a solution that isn't, well, now you have two dancers, then you're probably gonna have other problems in the party as well. Because if there's, like, what if you have to, like, which dancer gets to have the closer position on Sugar Riot? Who gets the short straw if they both are unwilling to negotiate? Then that's gonna be a problem, right? They might be willing to negotiate on that front, of course, but they also might not be. So, like that's why I'm like, as I said, I immediately look to, well, now we have a social problem. Is because if you can't even agree on that, then well, that's a bad start to a static. Yeah, I'm sorry for misunderstanding your point, Naomi. Was I Neves Altman? Yeah, the game plan for this little relaxed farm and talk is I have a lot of weapons that need to do books. And it is something that doesn't take very much effort. So we can easily just talk about stuff while I do some book steps. Which does mean that it'll probably be a while before we do do a later step. Oh, whoops. The exit is that way. I saw the door. Or I saw a door. Dan says, am I the only one that keeps mixing up the two Amdapals? No. It's a very common problem. Kawaki says, random does not matter question, but it got me curious. Assume you're in a party with 4 dancers, somehow. Is it better for you to pair up buffs, A, B, C, D, or have them in like a cycle? I'm like 99% certain that if you're playing optimally, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't matter, but it will be easier to do it with like pairs. The reason being that if you have 4 dancers, I'm pretty sure the best you can do for all 4 dancers to optimize, and that's, you know, ignoring everyone else in this equation. You have 4 dancers, and then who knows who else is there. You have 4 dancers, we're trying to optimize them, right? Then you would probably have each dancer like cycle technical finish. It's actually, I could imagine that the best you could do there is like one dancer does technical step finish, and then like everyone blasts as much as they can for 20 seconds, and then after the 20 seconds, like you maybe 1 GZD in, like a 1 GZD past, the next dancer like readies up technical finish. But you try to make it so that each technical finish is like roughly 30 seconds apart. So there's like 20 seconds of technical finish and then 10 seconds of nothing. Which also means that each dancer gets to do their technical steps while there are no raid buffs ticking. Then, for the odd and even minute, you can sort of have half of the dancers, like alternate half of the dancers doing devilment. So you basically alternate between technical finish from one dancer, and then on top of that you have devilment from 2 dancers, and then you have technical finish from 1 dancer, and then you have technical finish from 1 dancer with devilment from 2 dancers, and then technical finish from 1 dancer, and then you make this sort of like not odd and even minute burst, more like half-seas and whole-seas burst. And the reason why making the dancers in pairs instead of in like a cycle is because if they're in pairs, then A and B take turns doing devilment. C and D takes turns doing devilment. If you're in like a cycle, it becomes a lot more convoluted very quickly, I feel. You get me? Shaq, enmity of my enemy is coming soon. If you need that one. Because we're doing the pre-quest to that one. Just trying to find how much has happened while I was off on the dancer tangent. Exactly, Kawaki. Precisely. By just taking turns, you don't have to like think about, oh well, okay, who's the 2 that have to devilment now? Enjoy, Nox! Orion says, I find your voice so comfy and sometimes I will fall asleep to your content. Oh. The problem is when I watch... The problem is, when I watch a stream, my brain is like, ooh, comfy voice, man, time to sleep. And it... Oh. You have a... What is it you call it? Is it a Pavlovian response? Or what do you call it? You hear the person you hear when it's sleepy time. And then brain says, oh, it sounds like it's sleepy time right now. Conditioned. Right, that is a better word. The Pavlovian response sounds more, yes, bad. I do agree. And conditioned yourself. Funny random fact. Provoke doesn't work on basically any Fate mobs. I'm not sure if it works on like bigger Fate bosses and such. I believe the logic, I don't think we've gotten like a specific reason, but I believe part of the logic as to why is that a contributing factor to like your grade when you do a Fate is how much enmity you generated. So if you could provoke to generate enmity, that would break the system pretty hard. Yeah, absolutely, Dan. It is very common to mix up the two arm depots. In fact, I think I've had multiple discussions where someone will be like super insistent that something works in one specific way, and then like halfway through the conversation realize that, oh, actually I was thinking of the other one. Chuck it up to spaghetti code? No, specifically... So, the reason why part of the credit comes from enmity could be associated with spaghetti code, but it's so specific that it is quite clearly deliberate. It's not something that is, like, accidentally a thing. He's all Noric. Provoke also doesn't work on S ranks? Oh. That could be a problem. Yeah, basically, if Provoke works, then it would mean that you would be able to do, like, contribute, quote-unquote, just as much as a DPS, as far as the Fate system is concerned, by just coming back and provoking every 30 seconds on a single target fight. Let's see if Giant Seps has spawned in. Zavarian! Oh! It is not here. Let's start by seeing, are there any mobs in this zone? You know, I gotta hand it to them. Could you imagine if I just had a list of names for the mobs? Could you imagine how difficult it would be to find them? No, it's much better with an image, because, like, no mob in the game shares an icon. Every mob is unique, and everyone knows when they see this picture, they know that's, of course, a giant logger. You don't even need to click on it. Everyone knows that the giant logger is in the Boulder Downs, which is obviously here. Everyone knows this. And they never put 3 of the exact same model enemy in the same zone either. Yeah, exactly. Precisely. It just works. I'll say Fila and Crash Hard. Hope you're doing well. I mean, it looks really cool, but come on. You know, while we're on the topic, this guy has an axe in his hand. There's no axe in the picture. That guy doesn't have an axe. That's the guy in the picture. Isn't there exactly 3 loggers there too? Yes, sometimes there's just 2. Because I believe it's like... I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that some of the spawn points for the loggers, like, are shared. So, like, there's other mobs in the zone could land there, and because there is less objectives that have you kill the other ones, eventually there's just only 2 or 1. Oh, I need to pick up this quest. thank you, Erdl. Yeah, the good news about that book task, guys, is that it's very difficult to miss. There's only one type of thumbs up mob on the screen, so you can't miss that one. There is one that is like inverted. That's the evil one. Bundy says, does this theoretically mean that if diversion came back and you pressed it, you'd have less contribution generated? That's a good question. That I do not know. The main thing I know about the whole enmity contributes is that an extremely effective way to get high contribution on a... Did I go the wrong way? Nope. On a fate with like a single enemy, or like a hunt mark or something, is by just spamming your ranged attack. You know, the one with bonus enmity. How do we know the one who's inverted? Well, let's just say that the thumb is meant to be go upwards. maybe you might mistake the evil one as a dead thumbs up mob. Which is weirdly concerning when you think about it. I don't understand why they put that there. No, I'm just kidding. Hangout says, I went straight for captain rank in my company, so those challenge logs forced me to learn how confusing it can get. Indeed. Oh, right. Daring Harriers are over here. Another mob where there's like 3 of them total. Hey guys, what are you talking about? Yeah, really weird mechanics. And I think part of why they have such weird mechanics is probably just because, well, it works well enough. And this is something that would be neat, an in-game way of seeing what mobs certain materials drop from. Yeah, I could see that. You know, it's funny because the argument of, no, you're just supposed to know that, kind of falls flat when you have this and this and this. Like, there are options in the game that can just tell you. A little weird that they don't let you, like, track it for your monster material needs. But I guess part of it, there's 2 things to that. Two sides to that. The first one is that 14 is old enough that it can kind of work as an explanation that, you know, more old school RPG styles where you're just kind of supposed to figure that out yourself and write it down somewhere could be an explanation as to why. Like, that's supposed to be something you do, and the reason why other systems in the game have been improved on that front, while the monster hunting bit has not, is because the old zones where this is more of a thing, like more of a problem, quote unquote, they're old zones with materials that are usually in plenty enough supply that most players will just buy them if they can. Now, free trial players get the big oof on that one, but most players can just buy them. And that's usually enough. And the more recent zones have the whole bicolor gemstone system, where when you do a fate, you get some currency, which you can use to buy things. Notably, you can buy basically any material that comes from mobs in the expansions, like open world zones. So while there might be some efficiency or value to just, you know, going, well, I need some wolf hides. Like, I need some wolf hides. You could just, you know, fly over and just bash the wolves that are there if you're in the area. And, you know, boom jams, free hide, maybe, because it's a chance, right? It's often just more efficient to just do a fate or two and then just buy the wolf hide for bicolor gemstones, or if you're not on the free trial, just go to the market. There's probably someone who accidentally killed some wolves and got some wolf hides. So then that's kind of what happens, right? Is that they've put a lot of systems in that kind of mean that you don't have to. The reason why the mobs aren't... Like, I don't know how much truth there is to this, and that this might feel like making some claims about the game that we don't have evidence for whether it's true or not from the devs. But there is something to be said that a lot of systems in 14 are such that if you don't care to, there is nothing you need to go out into the open world to go and farm. Ever. Fate's technically optional. Most gathering, technically optional. And so on and so forth. And so much of it that... And then, if you then need the materials from that, well, by making it so that the material can just be traded, or you can buy them from doing other things, it's solved that way, right? And the classic, like, perfect, easy solution. I don't remember where the milk root clusters are. I feel like I missed them. I thought they were over there, but it looks like they're named differently. They nerfed manual hunting when they reworked Mug. Don't know what you mean by that, Bondi. They didn't change the cooldown of Mug, and Mug still has its effect. They might the crystal for Ramu. That over there? Over there. Was it over there? Over there. There it is. And there they are, indeed. It's really funny. I believe this one can spawn with... Like, some of the things here can spawn with the target you need as part of the fate. Which means you can pick it up by, like, going in the fate itself. Used to be 90 seconds? Oh, okay, yeah, then they nerfed that a bit. I feel like that nerf is so small that it's like... It's like if you lost your mind over an action being nerfed by 10 potency. But come to think of it, didn't they nerf... Was that 20 or 30? I remember in Shadowbringers... There was, I mentioned this before, there was in Shadowbringers this time where Summoner was a little cracked, like a little strong, and it was then like predicted they're gonna nerf Summoner, and people were losing their mind, and then like the nerf that came, if I remember correctly, was like 10 or 20 potency off Fester, or something like that. I remember that wrong. But I remember seeing it and seeing people losing their minds over it. It's like, bro, it's 20 potency on Festa. Fates up. Thank you, Shaq. Let's see if I can make it. Hey, Cat. Hope you're doing well. Grab Galaxy says, I sell the stuff at decent all the time, and it makes me a decent amount of gil over time. Also that's also a way you could just get, like, wolf leather without going out and farming, because it just appears. What if that 10 potency nerf changes its relative strength in your entire rotation and ends up overturned somehow? You know, that could happen, Naomi. That is a good point. Now, the big question, I think the important question there is, does it change for the better or for the worse? Because both options are very real. Hey, Provide! Hope you're doing well. And thank you so much. Nay, Seraph. Hope you're doing well as well. Is the stream manning? Well, we just got the last fate we need for this book, so now we can finally just finish these mobs. That says lots of people can't put the numbers in context, so they just see the nerf. Yeah, true. But yeah, just as a random example of what Naomi just said, I've mentioned the hyper-cursed optimal Black Mage rotation for level 35 to 41. That's correct, Bondi. The demi-materia could buy for like 25 poetics. Used to be worth 500 gil, I believe. The optimal maximum damage rotation for Black Mage at like level 40 for single target is Fire 3 times, then Fire 1 once, then Blizzard 3, Blizzard 1, and repeat. Of course, maintain Thunder. But the key thing to keep in mind here is that the damage difference between doing that and, you know, the not lunatic style rotation, like just, you know, use Fire 3 and Blizzard 3 to switch mode and then spam Fire 1 instead. Like, this optimal rotation is like 0.1 or 0.2% better, I think. Maybe a little more than that. And when the difference is that small, you start to look at potency changes. I'm pretty sure Fire 3 got buffed by like 10 potency at the launch of Dawntrail. Is that correct? Can someone check that for me? Does someone care enough to check that for me? As Metricon says, Mug's a fun concept, but it doesn't work as well in a game where you can murder a dozen mobs a minute. Yeah, I feel like Mug is like the kind of action that is like, it makes sense for a thief or a rogue or something to have like a mechanic where you can like steal extra loot or something. It's just that everything else in 14 is just pushing against a concept like that. Everything in the game is saying no. And they made it anyway. And then you have it in this janky way where it's like, you can get it once every now and then, and it's a chance? Shrug? Asymmetricon and Ilana says it was buffed by 20 potency in 7.0. Wait, is... When did it get 10 more? Oh, there it is. I think... Therefore I am. I think that when it got buffed to 280, it wasn't strong enough to beat it. Or maybe it was, because before 7.2, Fire 1 would have had the 2.5 second cast, making it slower. So maybe it would have won by a similar factor. But I wasn't made aware of this fact until 7.2, right? But those 20 potency of 7.0 likely was the thing that pushed it just over the edge and made this turbo cursed rotation technically optimal. It's just that it happened. The change made a cursed optimal rotation at level 35 to 41 in Dawntrail. And the optimal rotation was so much less stronger than the normal rotation that it's like, who cares? I feel like I keep coming back to that. Like the, who cares, actually? Not many. And then it just doesn't get researched or looked into because it doesn't matter. Admittedly, it doesn't matter. It's also why we have the Thunder Freeze rotation. It doesn't really matter. But the alternative is super weak as well. So it gets a little cursed. Hey Sorg, hope you're doing well. Says, is Denmark burning? I don't think it's burning, but we're getting up there. I'm pretty sure that Denmark is actively in Astral Fire 1 or 2. Just the whole country. Hey Rothkind, hope you're doing well. This Metricon says, in 11, Steel was a 5-minute cooldown, but you also didn't get to kill that many mobs of the same type quickly. That does change some things. I do find it funny because, you know, not that the comparison is that important, but it is pretty funny that by comparison, World of Warcraft's Rogue has Pickpocket that does not have a cooldown. In fact, a common leveling strategy in like classic WoW is that you use a macro to use Pickpocket and set a setting so that you instantly loot everything on like when you open like a loot window, and you just add that as a macro to the main action you open a fight with. So you stealth up to something and then you basically backstab the enemy with one hand while stealing their wallet with the other one in the same motion, just yoink. Because it just gives you, like, a penny extra every time you kill something that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Let's see here. Right, and then here we go again. We start with that one. Doesn't really matter which one. That one. Isopharons. I feel like we've been over this before. ISO for one. Is of or once. Or ISO for once. Can never remember what it was. Wait, is that the one? That might be the one. Run! Fly! Hey, Jonas! I took a break after the Necron trial. Do I have a lot of MSQs if I come back now? You have 2 whole patches of quests. If you read all of the dialogue and take your time, that could be like possibly like 10 hours maybe. You really take your time with it. But yeah, the trick, Echo Dance, is that if you do it every time, then you might kill a lot of mobs, and suddenly you have 5,000 pennies. Marginal opt in FF always comes down to the fact you can crit an above average amount and outperform the marginal gain anyways. That's true, Bundy. That is true. Which ultimately makes it even funnier how much we sometimes get caught up in these kinds of optimization scenarios. It's like, how much does it matter? Again? With waiting a bit, I guess. I mean, I think there's like... I would say in like a month, Jonas, nearly all content that will happen for the rest of the expansion will... Oh, there it is. Can I make that? I don't know if I can, but we will give it a solid try. In like a month, nearly all content that remains for the rest of the expansion will have landed. And then the next drop will be, you know, after New Year. Air supply. Oh, I feel like I remember that one is really annoying. Yup, it makes sense. I stole a grenade from a fish. Sure. Why not? Whatever. Wow, 5,000 pennies, and what do we use these pennies for anyways? See, the trick there, Echo Dance, is that in in classic WoW, at level 40, you need like 100 gold to get a mount. Remember the thing in 14 that they just go, congratulations, you did your service of walking everywhere for a while. Have a Chocobo mount. It's yours. Free of charge. Just enjoy. 100 gold. That doesn't mean anything when you don't know like the money value, but let's just say that it is not uncommon for players that don't really save to reach level 40 and not be close. Like, not even close. And then level 60, you need, I think it's like, it's either 60, I believe it's, Shaxes was 1,000 gold in vanilla. No, it was not. That was epic mount. I'm talking about the regular one. 1,000 was the epic mount at level 60. And then you also need a huge supply of money for all the endgame stuff you need. Again, in 14, most supplies are at a price point where, yes, it can get a little annoying and tedious to, you know, collect your money if you're not used to doing that. But for the most part, if you do content, you will get enough gil that you can buy your supplies. You need like 300 grand company tokens to be able to get your show. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Don't they basically give you those? Yeah, the worst fate for all these books is definitely surprise! It's like, it's a defense fate where the thing that needs defending is so fragile that the NPCs defending it will lose in like 30 seconds without player intervention. And the fate just spawns on its own. So if you're not in the area, they just immediately lose. Hey, wise up! And have a good evening, Taldemar. If I had surprise on the list here, I'd probably also just park myself there, and then we'd just have a chill conversation until it spawned, because there's no other way to do it. The only way to be able to, like, be relaxed about surprise is if you have, like, for instance, you could, I don't know, have, like, a couple bodies, like, scoping out fates for you, so they just find where they are, and then they see something like surprise spawn, and then they just go over and stall it. Then you could make it work, but otherwise, nope. Just nope. But it is so fragile that you straight up have to just hang out until it spawns, if you have it on your list. And by the way, if you're not using your lev allowance anyway, and you don't need like a huge lev quest amount of space, pro tip, write down, like if you have a specific order of books, you probably do, you can just take note of what lev quests will be in that book, and then you can grab like 12, 13, up to 13 lev quests and just hold them, so that, for instance, you could do 4 or 5 books without having to worry about, oh, did I pick up all the levs that I need? Like I will do today. Every book we do, I will just already have the lev quest and just go and do it. Which is why, like, I'm probably doing the levs last, because I have like nothing to worry about, and I have plenty of time to like recollect fates. Oh, sorry, why do I keep thinking fates? I will just be able to recollect all the levs that I need for another round later, because I find it very unlikely that I'll do like 5 books in one sitting like this. That's the spirit, Alamousy! If you don't pick up levs ahead of time, you might find that they don't have the one lev you need, since they reroll every time you do one. Yeah, the trick there that I usually use, and I do believe I talk about it in my AR Relic grind video, is if you have, like, you don't have any of the levs you need for a book, you go and check each of the lev mates to see if they have it. The probability that none of the 3 levs you need are present is exceedingly small. Like, the probability that none of them are there is minuscule, but it is there. So what you do is you go and check all of them, see if you can grab all 3. Grab the ones you can. And if you get any of them, you can use the ones you did get to reroll to try and get the other one you need. But it is a lot easier if you just, you know, use these lev quest rerolls like ahead of time, so that you can have several books worth of levs already locked and loaded. Hey, Might Strive. Hope you're doing well. Echo says, took me a while to do a bridge fate in Eastern Thunderland because when it did spawn, it failed and got sent to the fail fate state because the bridge one is a chain with a fail state. Oh man, the fates used to be complicated, yeah. Might Strive says, never done AR Relic. Is it easy? If you're not, like, actually level 50, like, if you're over-leveled, then nothing in the Relic grind is hard. It's just time-consuming. To put a little bit of a point of reference, a while back, I did a stream speedrunning an AR Relic. Just doing everything as quickly as possible. The only thing that wasn't done on stream was, I think, anything that needed like a resource you could collect in advance, like Alexandrite and things like that. I had that like already loaded and ready to just go for it. I had the poetics to buy books and whatnot. I had all of the resources needed to do it in advance. I just needed to do everything. It was, I believe, a 9-hour ordeal. Which is like, whoa, that's a lot. It's really spread out, isn't it? We spent 7 of those hours, I believe, doing this. Doing exactly what we're doing now. Because the book step is that long. But it's not hard, it's just long. Nox says I'm getting a heat-induced headache. Oh, man. Man. And even at 50, it's not exactly hard, you just need to grind longer. That's true, there's just some objectives where, like, everything is, you know, more time-consuming. A lot more time-consuming, and technically harder. Like, technically, it's harder. Also true, Skylar. The book step taking 7 hours was with me having 3 friends, Nox included, basically just being like a little spy network, checking every single world on the data center to find the fates that I needed in advance. So every time I was on a new book, I just, you know, just ping-pong teleported to every zone to just get the fates. Just ding, ding, ding. Made that step take way less time. And it still took that long. It still took that long. I was like, Skylar. Yeah, I can imagine so, Nox. Do you not have any painkillers or something? Not that, I don't know if that will help when you have a heat-induced headache. Yeah, Relic speedrun took about 8 hours. Really? Then the book step must have taken 6. Oh, 7. It was still 7. That's incredibly cursed, because that just tells you how quickly everything else went. I feel like that sounds so unbelievable, doesn't it? And yet, my god, how could you? You stole the mob that I needed. Now I'll steal this one. Steal. That's how it works. Thank you, Erdl. Let's do some dungeons now. I'll fly over there. It's starting to have taken so long for the fate to spawn that I'm starting to suspect that I might miss it. Spending time in a different zone. I'll do dungeons, which sounds counterintuitive, but it makes sense because I'll spawn in right above the fate if it does spawn. Nyom. That's correct, Might Strive. The current expansion's relics, I believe the most recent step was the paste grind, and the final step should be arriving in like a month. No, that is correct, Skylar. If it's not your first weapon, then that is something you could do. And do the quest step simultaneously. That's also why you might have a specific order. I might have already goofed that. But that is a good point. That is also something you can do. Is do the quest step that comes later simultaneously with the book step. I think that probably also might have contributed. No, wait a minute. I think what I did for the speedrun, I might have actually done the quest step separately because it's, you know, it's items to collect, something like that. Can't actually remember. But that would also increase the time it takes. I guess the way that I'll do that, just to make sure everything is back in order, because I've definitely forgotten to do that, I might have to just finish the quests I have here before I start on books for a different job. Hey, Myra Song! Because I'm still on the first step of the Dawntrail relics. Ooh, the Atma step, right? Nope. And let's see here. That's what we need this for, and this for. I think. Isn't it? I believe it's all of this craziness, all of these things that we have 6 of. And that one. Oh, well, let's take a moment to do that. That's also a little relic thing to do. Are you going to do the relic teapots too? I already have the relic teapots. We did that ages ago when I got my Black Mage relic. Hey Fisher, hope you're doing well. I wonder if they fixed it. There was a bug, I believe. I think it was if you handed in something to Brangwine like this, then she wouldn't give you the daily quest for the treasure map. At least not at that very moment. She just wouldn't. I need to clean my inventory. It's good, getting a little spooky overfilled. Right, now we go back to Falgoth Float. Back to camp the fate we need. In case it spawns. See, the thing is, Myra Song, there is an advantage to both methods. If you don't like Occult Crescent, then, like, I mean, don't go there. The main advantage to Occult Crescent is that the critical engagements have, like, 4 times higher drop rate for the Atmas. But the disadvantage of Occult Crescent is that you have no control over where the critical engagements or fates spawn. So, at some point, the potential speed... Now, I say this because I did that step when Occult Crescent was, like, bumping, because it was new. So it was really fast. Might not be as fast now. But if we assume it is really fast, at some point, the fact that you might have, like, 3 of the Atmas completed... So, like, half of the zone's fates and critical engagements don't do anything for you, suddenly means that there's a better value in just going to a zone and doing fates there. There's also the part that if you haven't finished on shared fates, then I believe on average, now, you could be unlucky, you could be lucky, but on average, if you've not started on fates in any zone, you should on average finish a whole zone's shared fates exactly as you get the last Atma you need. Random math. Anyway, I'm pretty sure this fate doesn't come and go in under 3 minutes, so I think we will have a quick BRB and then back on the grind in some form or another. In the meantime, Manatee restored. Is that the one? Oh, well, there you go. That's how you do it, guys. So what you do... How do you fade farm? The specific fade you need for anything? What you do is you park yourself right over it, and then you just go AFK. You'll use the same weapon that the game uses against you, where if you queue for a duty and then go AFK, the duty pops. Doesn't matter how long you've been sitting there waiting for the duty to pop. It spawns when you leave so that you can miss it. We use that power against the game and trick it into giving me the fate that I wanted by thinking that it can pull a sneaky on me. But I was close enough that I could catch it all along. That's how it's done. It's just that easy. Start the book step at 20 minutes into the stream, right? So the first step we were assembling the weapon took 20 minutes or so. Finished book step at 6 hours and 57 minutes, which means that the book step took 6 hours and 30 minutes-ish. Yeah, that sounds about right. And when did we finish? In total? A watched pot never boils and a watched fate never spawns. Exactly, as Metrocom. Precisely. $8.26. Okay. Yeah, all of that combined does sound more reasonable. Or it sounds like makes more sense. Because I felt like... I didn't feel like we could do... Like, I feel like the Alexandrite step alone took like 5 minutes, maybe 10. Which is crazy, because for those that don't know, the Alexandrite step is where you have to put Alexandrite and materia in your weapon. And you do it one materia at a time. And there is no just fill it out for me button. You actually have to do it one by one by one. And that takes a while. Because you need to do like 75 of them. They won't unify skill and spell speed since it could potentially mess up someone's Alexandrite step. I find that hard to believe that that would be it. However, your point of they don't want to unify them because it could break something, that I could believe. But I find it hard to believe that the thing that would be the problem is an old relic grind. That I don't think they care about. But I could imagine that it could be a similar thing to the old Summoner Scholar problem, where they're like, we wish we could split them up again, but we literally can't. And yeah, if you are enjoying the stream, it does help a lot with a like over on the YouTube side of things. Thanks much in advance. Nice off! Hope you're doing well. They got rid of elemental materia even though it made the Heavensward relic farm slightly harder. Exactly. Precisely. Like, that's how I expected things would go. Which is why I'm like, I don't think it would be for an old relic, but unifying two stats could possibly break some things. They might be able to, like, you know, if we're already making spaghetti, right? If we're already in the spaghetti, then maybe they can just be like, you know, visually for the player and as far as the game is concerned, this like the stats are combined, but in the backside, like in the back rooms of the game, it's actually skill and spell speed split up. And they just made it so that everything's like that the things are just getting added together before they're used for anything, and then it just works. And the reason why I think that might make sense to do is because it wouldn't surprise me if just merging the stats, like just wholesale, no discussion, nothing else involved. Wouldn't surprise me if something broke. The dungeons took a surprisingly long amount of time. Yes, exactly. You can see just now, like, I am kind of hurrying through. I just goofed it, didn't I? I left behind some oil. I'm kind of hurrying. Meanwhile, now, guys, watch me run back. Am I not supposed to have 3 by now? Yes. Such speed! Such incredible speedrunning prowess. Gas, gas, gas. Try not to mentally check out during book step challenge, right? Hey, Silva. World record speed. I am become speed, destroyer of actually doing the dungeon's mechanics. Yeah, and see, the reason why you came back to that, Silly, is because I'm actually covering for the fact that the thing you should actually be coming back to is like that awkward thing where someone is, you know, just awkwardly waddling back to the sound effect of like Squidwards walking. Because that's what's actually happening here. Dang it. Bro! It's a little harder when you have a little latency. If it does 0 damage, this is it still cancel the channel? I don't know, but I tried it over here and then it just didn't come up. So I assumed I didn't need it on the other one. Take this fist! The John Perry Stork should have invested in more speed so it could interrupt faster. Pretty much. Could you imagine? Imagine the slightly alternate timeline of 14 where the Stalkers in Wanderer's Palace swing just fast enough and move just fast enough that the dungeon is literally unsoloable because you can't click the things because the Stalkers stop you. Imagine how insanely annoying it would be to do the book step then. Ninja could solo. Maybe. You would have to like run really far. Like the problem there might be that the stalkers only chase you so far. So even if you bait them really far away, like they'll just reset. Wait for you. But yeah, I do see how you could use Shukuchi twice to like travel a really long distance and maybe make it work. Doesn't hide work on them? I believe hide would disappear when you interact with the thing. But if it doesn't, then you're right. Yeah, well, in that case it would work. I hadn't thought about hide. There's of course the problem that you have to clear the duty as the appropriate job, so you'd have to bring a ninja with you to do it. And at that point you've kinda like the original concept of soloing the dungeon is already broken. But it would still be funny if you needed a friend for that dungeon. And also really annoying. The hackers on sheer mastermind! And he's dead. Can you complete the AR Relic grind solo? Yes, but only the ninja one. This is also the quintessential dungeon where I ran it so fast as ninja that the Spriggan there bugged out. And we had to reset the whole dungeon. For those that remember. Yeah! Wow! He just took that. He just tanked it. Biggie kinda big. Hello? He's the master mind, not the master body. Good point. Hey, mister! Hope you're doing well. Yeah! Ding. Wait, what? Oh. Right. I have to try and catch up these quests, because I forgot to do them in tandem. It had been so long since I've done relics that I completely forgot that there was this whole system. Did I go the wrong place? Where are you? Is Atkin the one at the materia place? Yes. The whole reason why you're supposed to do the books in a specific order to optimize is that the quest step gives you dungeons in a specific order. And if you do the books in a specific order, then there will be such a huge overlap in those that you can just do it all once. Like just one sequence. And save time. But if you forget to keep up with both, then I mean, then that it doesn't work. Obviously, then it stops working. And then you're just doing the quests in a strict and specific order for nothing. I believe the golems are like up there. Or there. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. By the way, Provide mentioned it earlier, but yeah, since last week, I've been putting out polls on the YouTube channel asking for people's opinions on which job in like pairwise comparisons you feel is the hardest. Which of course being like comparing pairwise every combination of jobs in a role, like all of the tanks, all of the healers, specifically so that we can like figure out, is A harder than B harder than C harder than D, and so on. Very interesting. I'm of course going to use the information for videos. But something that I found really, really funny, that I also kind of finished on looking into today, is among the tanks, I do find it mildly interesting that, you know, Dark Knight is often by many considered to be like Lomao easy. Yes, really. And because of the simplification of Gunbreaker, many now also say that Gunbreaker is Lomao easy. But what's really interesting is that people can somewhat agree that those two tanks are by far the hardest anyway. Despite that, like despite it being made easier, it's still so much that when I made like an extra poll comparing all 4 tanks, Gunbreaker got like 65% of the votes, I think. It was crazy. No, maybe not 65%, but it got so many that it completely overshadowed, like I think it had more than all the other 3 combined. And then Warrior barely got any. Also, hey, Yumakoi, hope you're doing well. And hey, Merfolk, hope you're doing well as well. And thank you so much for the 10 gifted memberships. Thank you. 66, 26, 2, 6. Gunbreaker, Dark Knight, Warrior, Paladin. Yeah, exactly. What I think is really interesting about that is I don't remember the exact percentage share, but when I did a similar poll in Endwalker, it had the same, like, ranking of Gunbreaker, Dark Knight, Paladin, Warrior in that order. Zabs, I found it very hard to even come up with an answer to those polls. They're so similar. That's understandable. Like, I can perfectly acknowledge that it is like that, but I also spend a lot of time thinking over these things. Like, to be clear, I find what I find really fascinating about it is that, like, I take this information. Thanks so much for the 5 gifted subs, Jack. Thank you. Hey, Kamorensu. Hope you're doing well. Are you also Yumakoi? Thank you so much, Jack. And Merfolk. What I found really interesting is that, like, I will take this information and then I'm like, I feel like I have a pretty solid overview of how all these kind of things work. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at, like, I feel, at discerning why people feel the way that they do about these kind of things. But taking it in hindsight and going, well, if we already have the data of what people think is hard, it's actually really easy to see why people find specific jobs hard. Because as I was looking over the data that I had, I'm like, yeah, that makes pretty good sense, because I have a lot more arguments as to why warrior is easy than I have arguments as to why Gunbreaker would be easy. Like, why would someone vote that Gunbreaker is easier than a different job? Why would someone vote that warrior is easier than a different job? Oh, that's okay, coming in. So I just thought it was funny that it was the exact same message. And it's pretty interesting, because I found personally that it similar to this voting like comparison, like what people came up with. I also found that I had gradually less to add about the ease of a job as we got closer to Gunbreaker, and more to say about why it's hard. But it's also interesting because I sometimes had a lot to say, a lot I could add about why someone would find something like Warrior hard. Because if people say that Warrior is hard, or like some people say that Warrior is hard, but not that many, that sometimes gives the insight that that's because the people that think Warrior is hard think that for an extremely specific reason, or they're trolling, right? Or they are like, the reason is something that is like, well, it's actually because they have no idea what they're talking about, or something like that. But it is like weird things like, for instance, if you're like thinking max level, then a pretty solid reasoning as to saying, well, I think Warrior's hardest could be you're a Savage Raider, and you're recognizing that because Warrior's Bloodwetting is weaker than the other tank's short cooldown, and Thrill of Battle might not feel as impactful as what the other tanks have, and Equilibrium is not necessarily as helpful to compensate for having Thrill of Battle. Like, if you don't feel like the specific cooldowns Warrior has is as good as the things the other tanks have, then you might be going into the comparison thinking, well, this job is way harder to play defensively, so it's harder. Because offensively, they're basically the same as far as I'm concerned. Things like that. Serve says, wait, if you don't know what you're talking about, or, for instance, didn't play the job, why would you vote? You might, like, a lot of those votes are, I haven't played the job yet, but I play the other job and I find that very easy. So by elimination, the job I haven't played must be hard. And it is their opinion, they're allowed to have that, right? Oops. Or it could be, I have only played this one, I haven't played the other one, and I have no intention of playing the other one, but my friends say that that one is the harder one, so I'm just gonna vote on that. Or invert the whole thing. I have only played this one of the two, and I've been told by my friends that the one that I'm playing is harder, so it has to be that one. Or I picked up this job because I thought it was difficult. I've been told that it is difficult. So it must be difficult, because otherwise why would I be playing it? Like, I'm playing it because it's hard. Like, this was a thing that came up a little bit with the Endwalker poll, is that, interestingly, if I had a comment come in on mages, if someone said, I'm a black mage main, and then, like, the follow-up was their explanation for their vote, the options that were likely to happen was them saying, and black mage is easy clap, and very little explanation as to why. Because as far as they're concerned, Black Mage is easy. They've spent the time mastering it, so it's easy as a result. But they can't explain why, because, you know, they just played it a lot. As for them, it's easy. Or they might go Black Mage is really hard and list a bunch of reasons. But sometimes they would also... A Black Mage main seemed to be more likely to vote that Red Mage was harder. And a Red Mage main was more likely to vote that a Black Mage was harder, as far as I could see. Which is, you know, not that reliable data, but I didn't necessarily use that in the results in any meaningful way. But it was something that I found very interesting. That seemed to be a pretty consistent through line, that they were likely to vote on each other because, well, I've mastered my job, so the other one is harder for me. Sale feed? I feel many jobs' power level varies a lot by level bracket. Level 100, all tanks and healers have so much in their kit to solve situations, but below 45, Astro feels insane compared to the other healers. True. True. In my Endwalker difficulty comparison, I like quickly glanced over my manuscript from that one. I spent a lot more time talking about how, like, for instance, Paladin could feel harder at certain levels where it didn't have tools the other tanks already had. Didn't include it as much in this time around, because I feel like the majority of players that would vote it go in that category of they have tried both. They may very well have leveled them, and the ones that are like, I haven't actually played it to max, are the one, like some of the more like loose cannons, right? Might not be as useful data from them. So while it is relevant to not ignore that, it's probably a smaller factor in these comparisons. Crab Galaxy says, I feel like I can't even vote on those things because my personal experience doesn't match with what other people say. Example, I find Scholar easier to understand than Sage. So you vote that you think that Sage is harder. Crab Galaxy, you're basically excluding yourself from the poll for the precise reason the poll exists. Like, the past few days, including today actually, I've been putting out polls for healers because I'm going every single combination, all 6 combinations, because I want all of it. I want to know everything. I don't want to be like, well, everyone knows that that one is the easy one, and just like completely silence potential information on it. I want to know. I got comments questioning why I was wasting people's time and things like that with these obvious answer questions. Which, to be fair, one of those comments was on a poll that was like 97% to 3. But I specifically want that because the 3% that thought the job that was like supposedly the easy one is hard, I want those votes. And even better if they like, I might not catch the comment. There's actually a lot of comments. I get a lot of comments, so I don't catch that much actually. But if I see it, and people might care about the discussion. There are people like, how do people find that difficult? And sometimes they get an answer that explains exactly why. And then they learn something. But it's a lot more interesting to hear from the 3% in such a poll than the 97%. Because all the like a large majority of the 97% might say that because it's just universally agreed upon. They might even just vote the majority because they want to be part of the majority. So don't exclude yourself, Crab Galaxy. If you feel that Scholar is easier, you just vote on that when we have a Scholar Sage comparison. You just choose Scholar as, you choose Sage as the harder one. And if you want to, you can leave a comment elaborating. But it's interesting information. And don't exclude yourself for not being part of the majority. That's exactly the point of having a poll, to figure out what people think. I would say it's probably a better idea to say, I'm just gonna hold back on this one if you're in the portion that is like that we just talked about, that is like, well, actually I've only played one of them. Like if that's your starting like opening gambit, then maybe skip that one. Because at that point, your vote is basically, it's what I've heard. But to be fair, sometimes you could also just perceive it like that. Like for instance, some players might say that Dark Knight is really hard to play because they have seen a lot of Dark Knights be bad. Like straight up just, they've seen Dark Knights be garbage. And be like, well, the only possible explanation is that the job is hard. Also, thank you so much for the sub, Floral Buns. Thanks so much. Hope you're doing well. Name Batman. Batman says, my interpretation of which job is harder is which job is more obtuse at lower levels, or which job makes a minor mistake feel more major. That also makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Like, one of the big factors that I thought about when I was like looking at why is it that so many people feel that Gunbreaker is so hard, and a huge factor to that, I feel, is that if you make a mistake on Gunbreaker, it can have pretty catastrophic results immediately and affect you for the rest of the battle. Whereas if you make a mistake on Warrior or on Warrior or Paladin, I would say at least, it's a lot more fixable, much cheaper to fix. Dark Knight, depending on the kind of skill level you're like dealing in, can go either way. Like if you're doing more casual content, your mistake basically just doesn't, like, it barely does anything because you might not be doing rate cooldown optimization anyway, right? So you drifting a major cooldown a bunch doesn't do anything because like you were just hitting it whenever you felt like it anyway. But if you are doing rate buff alignment optimization and such, then drifting, I don't know, Living Shadow by 30 seconds is pretty catastrophic for your damage. Hey Rillian, hope you're doing well. That's the spirit. I hope you have fun with the G-posing. But yeah, exactly that. You can interpret it in a lot of ways, and there are indeed some that have left questions like, so difficult in what way? And I could be like, which one do you find most difficult in this very specific way? The thing is, the reason why, if you've seen the polls that I've made, the reason why the poll basically just starts with poll question. Just one sentence. And then there's this huge block talking about the most recent poll, why all of this is happening, like what is all this, and even like a little note saying you might have read this before, so yeah, it's the same block as before, is because a lot of people don't read any of it. They just see poll, question, poll, click. So if I had been like, which job do you think is the hardest in Savage content, it would be equally corrupted by people being like, well, I mean, I don't actually savage raid, but I have heard. So it's probably safer to just say, let's assume that no one is savage raiding, or maybe some are, and then we'll just deal with what we're given, and then we'll take it from there. Because I can't guarantee that the data that I get is a specific type of data anyway. Same you Wells. Hope you're doing well. So that's why. And then I just leave it up for the, you know, the individual to go, well, when I think difficulty, I think this. And then, like, I can actually tell a lot from the results of the polls. Like, for instance, the fact that Warrior basically got completely overshadowed by all other tanks. I'm not going to talk too much detail about the polls, and you're welcome to check them yourself, but maybe you haven't voted yet, and this might affect your vote. Could be because Warrior is perceived by the casual player base as completely cracked overpowered. Like, completely broken beyond belief. Meanwhile, Savage Raiders are like, eh. And because these players feel that Warrior is completely broken beyond belief, as a result, Warrior's really easy. Because a really easy job would automatically be really easy to play because it has a lot more room for failure. Hey, Brewski! The place Warrior shines is the place where most people see it. Precisely. I also know this specific angle of the conversation because I made that video a while back, What's Up with Warrior? And it's pretty funny because there are some comments going, why are you, like, there's nothing wrong with Warrior, it's perfectly fine. Then there are comments that go, we basically, like, Warrior's basically useless and any other tank would be better for a party every time. So it would actually be better. Warrior needs buffs to just be viable. And then there are comments saying, why are you even suggesting that Warrior is weak at all? Have you seen how busted Bloodwedding is? And I'm like, yeah, actually, Bloodwedding is, when it comes to Savage content, Bloodwedding is Warrior's, like, Achilles heel. That's the weakness of Warrior, is that its short cooldown sucks. Like that. Meanwhile, in casual content, the thing that makes Warrior busted is that its short cooldown is broken. All at once. Which I think is absolutely hilarious. And you can basically tell, at least in part, how many believe one thing or the other based on how heavily the vote is skewed. It's of course all, at that point, interpretation, and it's me guessing. But there are a lot of combined explanations where it's like, how would Warrior only get 2% of the votes? When it is known that Warrior has a hard time in certain content. Things like that. Exactly, Merfolk. There is enough opinions and feelings about the game just on its own that it is perfectly possible for all of the things to be true. So that says, I don't play tanks at all in group content, so I just rank them based on my solo deep dungeon experience. Exactly, that's also a way to do it. And I do feel like, by just asking blankly, which one do you think is the hardest? You will, at the very least, get like a spread of answers that, when combined, should result in whatever tank is the hardest, in the majority of cases, will win such a poll. Now, just to clarify the reason why I have to do it in like 6 polls instead of 1, is one part is back in Endwalker, I could just barely fit all of them. A YouTube poll can have at most 5 options, and if it's a picture poll, it can only have 4. So in Endwalker, the melee DPS poll didn't have job icons, which I think affected how many saw it, so it didn't get as many votes. But now that Viper's here, they don't fit at all. So this time around, we basically have to do them in pairs. Prince of Angels. Nice. I hope your grind is going well. Obligatory Viper's easy, Lamal. It's actually pretty funny there, because I have seen enough comments say that Viper is way more complicated than people give it credit for. And that one is gonna be hard to explain, because the people that understand Viper will be like, how? How? But the main reason why I've done them all in pairs is because if you make a poll, like if you ask, you can only give one answer. Which job in Final Fantasy XIV is the hardest? Maybe you get Astrologian. Like maybe the majority says Astrologian. Just as a random example. Let's say that that's what happens, right? Then, some people said other jobs. Some might have said Black Mage. Some might have said Pixman. Some might have said Red Mage. Some might have said Machinist. Some might have said Bard. Some might have said White Mage. Some might have said Warrior. But what's really important is you didn't ask which job is the second hardest. You asked which one is the hardest. So, if there is a split, like basically if you had asked which job is the second hardest in the game, then you would have gotten a completely different spread, because everyone who had an opinion on what's the hardest and second hardest and so on, I don't know why I looted that, will use their vote differently based on what question you asked. So if you ask, you can only leave one vote. There's 21 options. That will be... that you can only... essentially, the only answer you can use is which one is at the top. Because the second hardest is, you know, just the leftovers. That's just the loser of that particular question. So instead of doing that, I've just asked people to compare 2 jobs repeatedly. Which means that by elimination, each pair, we can assume that if Paladin is harder than Warrior, then Warrior is easier than Paladin. And by doing every single comparison, we then have like a hierarchy. I haven't had anything cursed come up yet, but I'm looking forward to the day where we have like a loop. So hey, Okiawea. Okiawea. The hardest job is the one I'm playing when I cause a wipe. Truth. True. Ancient Slayer. Sounds like a tournament bracket in a way of which role is the hardest. It's not gonna be necessarily like that, but we might have to do something like that when it comes to all the roles and such. But it is kind of tournament brackety, but instead of going, we have this versus this, and this versus this, and then the winner at the end, I've just gone, well, we're just having I can't remember if it's called round robin or what it is, but we're having a... Everyone has to play a match. In Yashuki. Everyone has to play a match against each other. And then, essentially the one that wins most must be the hardest. And the one that loses the most must be the easiest. Rollbun says, not gonna lie, what I find hardest within a role depends entirely on what the duty is, and if I'm with a pre-made or randoms, I think. Yeah, it makes sense. Like, if we take, like me, for instance, if I voted on the poll, I didn't. I haven't voted. As the maker of the poll, I can't vote, but I have a private account. I could vote if I wanted to. I haven't. But I would probably also put Gunbreaker as the hardest. If I was voting. But it's probably for a very different reason than a lot of other people would. Because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I have mentioned before that ignorance is bliss at times. Me knowing that this thing is not optimal or that I'm making a mistake makes me find it harder. Yeah, Neograno. Neograno. We are doing AR Relic grind. Whatever's hardest can also depend on how someone plays a specific job. Like, I play Dark Knight a lot. To me, it isn't too bad. Yeah, exactly. That's also what I said earlier, is that in the Endwalker polls I did, it was a lot more likely that a black mage, like a person opening their argument with, as a black mage main, was a lot more likely to say red mage is harder. And someone who opened their argument with, I'm a red mage main, is more likely to say that black mage is harder. There was also, like, specifically for black mage, because this was not so common with other roles, I feel, but specifically with black mage, there was a lot of votes that was like, as a black mage main, black mage is obviously the hardest job in the game. That's why I play it. So they were obviously never going to vote on a different job, because if they admit that black mage is not the hardest, then what are they doing? Oh, it's that one. Selfie says, some polls use a point system, like everyone ranks all options and each vote gets more points the higher they rate it, but that wouldn't be possible on YouTube, and it would take more time to do compared to just clicking one button of two options. Exactly. That's also what I say in the big blurb on the polls is, I am aware that there are better ways to do this. Unfortunately, they don't exist on YouTube as an option to make a poll. And if I ask you to click on this link to this survey doc that I made, I'm already losing like 90% of potential voters, if not more. So I basically chose to do it in this convoluted way to increase the odds that we get as many people voting as possible. Exactly. And that's how we ended up there. And I did look if there was a way. There just wasn't. Tower of Power is down here, right, guys? It spawns here with an NPC you have to talk to. Is that correct? Yes. Aus Hallenatgard. And Taken was like here? Well, this zone, either way, pretty much always has like 2 mobs. So let's just do those while we're here. I mean, exactly. There are definitely some comments that are like, why are we doing it in this inefficient way? But, you know, I'm the guy who has to deal with the way social media works on that. And they're just leaving a vote. But that would definitely be the most effective way to get the data would be to have one big doc and just say rank the jobs in each role based on what you find the hardest. And you could even set it up so that you can like elaborate on your answer and you have each vote with explanation and everything. But it becomes so like then suddenly it's a little bit of an involved question. Like, oh, it's a little bit much, and then you don't get an answer. It is funny. There can be an argument of how white mage can be hard. Like there is something here and there, compared to astrologian. Like, people often point to how many options Astrologian has. And White Mage doesn't have as many options, it feels like. But in most situations where how many options you have matters, you have a co-healer. And them having options cover for you not having options. If it is a problem that you don't have a lot of options. Exactly, Mistel. Like, in an average party comp, White Mage having less mitigation options, or less consistently available mitigation options than a barrier healer's, like, yeah, because that's the mitigation healer's problem. That I accidentally just called the barrier healer the mitigation healer, but that's basically how it works. Yes, that's yes, that's correct. The reason why the pure healer has less reliable mitigation options is because the barrier healer is supposed to say, oh, there's a raid wide coming up. I'm gonna set up a barrier and do some mitigation. And they have short enough cooldowns that they can just spam that forever. Butterfly says you're doing another relic? Oh, Butterfly, the plan is that I'm just gonna casually work through all of them. This is excellent chill content to do while just talking, right? I'm just doing this while we're talking. So, it's just something to do. So I'm not just standing somewhere. More exciting background footage for the very, very exciting conversation we have. There it is! Nailed it. Epic. And yeah, that's also like, that's where the difference tends to be a lot more clear, is when you're in content where you can't or won't have both a barrier and a pure healer. Then suddenly, one of them having like a distinct advantage in some form or another becomes very hard to ignore. Before 7.4, White Mage was severely lacking in mitigation and damage and high-end content. I don't know if they were actually lacking in damage. Because I don't believe they got buffed that much. Anyone can pull up how much damage buffs a white mage got in 7.4? Please let me know. Was it more than a small buff to Glare and a small buff to Dia? And then, of course, a small buff to Afflatus Misery to match. The way I usually do it is that I will open my search engine of choice. I know I can do this myself. I'm just, you know, now that we're here anyway, I just, you know, search 7.4 14 patch notes. Oh, there it is. Let's hope it doesn't despawn before I make it. Provides us white mage got 10 potency on Glare. Exactly. So, knowing this, Provide, would you like to change your statement when you said before 7.4 white mage was severely lacking in mitigation and damage in high-end content? I imagine you might want to change the statement on the damage portion at least. I'll get to the defensive portion afterwards, but 10 potency is probably not severe. You get what I mean? I mean, 10 potency is 10 potency. We're not going to be mad about it, but it doesn't feel like it was a severe difference. A 3% DPS increase? That's pretty big. But I don't feel like 3% DPS increase equals severe weakness. But maybe that's just me. In my mind, severe sounds like 10%. They also got full lilies at the beginning of instance, which is quite large increase due to having misery in the opener. That is true. That is fair. Fair enough. You win this time, Provide. On the mitigation side of things, though, for basically all of Dawntrail and potentially some late parts of Endwalker as well, it was a pretty common thing that, oh, yeah, Astrologian just has one more mitigation option than White Mage, because White Mage does not have Collective Unconscious. And yeah, that's really, really hard to look past. And I mean, all I'm saying is that in like 7.3, like we're talking weeks before, or even just week before 7.4, I put out a video. Like, I made a couple videos of, like, suggestions to improve jobs. And one of the suggestions I did was White Mage could use a little bit more mitigation. You know where you could put it? For instance, you could just put, like, 5 or 10 seconds of 10% mitigation on Plenary Indulgence. What happened? 10% mitigation on Plenary Indulgence. I'm not saying that they took my idea. The space in which they did it was so quickly after my video that it is basically an impossibility that I had any impact on the decision. They already knew. It would be more likely if it would be a more likely story that I had insider information and just knew that they were gonna do that than the possibility that they saw my video and went, "That's a great idea, we'll just do that." But it would be really funny if that's how it happened. It'd be so funny if that's how it happened. Yeah, that's a weirdly... I feel like it's almost like a 14 classic Provide. If you check logs, like counts of passes on jobs, like right now, or in 7.4, I feel like it's pretty common that unless the strong, like this, the more difficult option is way better than the easier option, then the easier option tends to be, like, even though it's weaker, have a lot more a lot more representation, just because it is easier. But it does make sense. It makes sense because, let's say that it requires... Get ready for Kai is a mathematician. Let's say that the harder job requires X amount of effort to you know, get the potential out of it where it is like the clear winner, right? And then the easier one is like, let's say 5% weaker at its peak. Like if they're both being played perfectly, then the weaker one is like, it's just abstract, just examples, right? I'm not saying that this comparison exists, but let's say that the weaker one is 5% weaker at peak performance, but all the content that players care about is beatable with that 5% weakness. So the 5% weakness just makes things, you know, a little harder. But it takes like 80% of X effort to get that 95% performance on the easier job. Then the amount of effort it would take you to get the maximum value basically says that your time is probably higher value playing the easier job, because on the easier job you have to put in less total effort to hit that 95% performance, whereas you'd have to put in, you know, 25%, relatively speaking, more effort to get that extra 5% of the harder job. And those 25% extra effort might be too much. Naomi says, Astus Hard is definitely not a controller exclusive issue. No. Meow. Hope you're doing well. And also, Flavero, hope you're doing well as well. And thank you so much. That's very kind. That is part of it. And there's a lot of things that can be difficult to see from, like, why do people care? Like, why do people choose specific things? It's also really funny. Like, I've mentioned this before, and I think it's one of the most interesting pieces of data. Did I catch you earlier, Bobomet? No, you've been here a while, so just today. You know what, Bobomet? I still hope that you're doing well. I hope you're all still doing well. That hanging out in this stream has not worsened your day. Would you imagine? Well, my day was all right, but then you started talking. I mean, there's this question about controllers. I don't use them, but does controller feel better than keyboard? Is it less stressful to play the game in controller than it is in keyboard? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the biggest problem with this kind of comparison, Flamera, is that the kind of player that started on controller and never switched to keyboard will tell you yes. The player that started on... the person that started on controller and never switched to keyboard will tell you yes, it is easier. The player that started on keyboard and never tried controller will tell you no. The player that started on keyboard and switched to controller and stuck with controller will probably tell you yes, there's a reason they switched. And the player that started on controller and switched to keyboard will tell you no, because there's a reason they switched. So it's one of these things where any data you can get is almost guaranteed to be muddied by someone has a different opinion. So it makes it really difficult. I feel like I'm pretty solid at trying to make things by comparison, but even I am, of course, going to be biased. I can say that when a player says that a thing is impossible on controller, it's likely because they don't play on controller. Because I haven't seen... Like all I'm saying is that some people will be like, you can't savage raid as a clicker, and then it's like that some of the best players in the world are clickers. Partly clickers. They're like... Some of the best players in the world, of course, is a pretty wide spectrum for that to be true, but there are players that are better than you that are clickers. Let's just say, like, unless you can, like, provide evidence that, no, actually, I was like, you know, week 1, all Kefka Ultimate, no problem, easy peasy. Then there is a likely chance that there is a clicker better than you. I'll say, Weaver, and that's not meant to be a bad thing. It's just saying the reason that you might find it unbelievable that something can be done playing in a control scheme that you don't know about, or don't do, or don't believe in, or whatever, could be because you don't do it. Sally says one of the world's second UMAD raiders was a clicker. I think it was their red mage. There you go. So if you're not better than that red mage, then there exists a clicker better than you. And ultimately, whatever control scheme works for you is what's best for you. Actually, a little funny detail from me is that part of the... Like, in my job guides, I fill in my hotbar gradually, right? Like, fill in where they go. Sometimes people get caught up in that because they see my hotbars and go, how can you play on the standard control scheme like that? That's ludicrous. I'm like, yep, I don't. From, like, at this exact cutoff point here, like, right in the middle of my hotbars to the right, I don't click those with my keyboard. And I don't click them with a cursor unless I'm really lazy. I click them with... Well, I can't reach. Too short. I have an MMO mouse. As a thumb grid. That's how I click them. And then the logic there, you might be thinking, so you're misleading people into using your control scheme. No, I'm not. If someone says that they use my control scheme, I usually get concerned. That seems like a bad idea. But it does motivate people to, like, see, oh, I need to optimize for myself. I need to optimize for myself and figure out what works for me. And if, like... The only time that I'll be like, you should probably change your UI is if there is a really glaring problem, like there's information you can't see because of a decision you made. Like hiding information or blocking the view of it in one way or another. Or if you say, I can't do insert thing that should be doable because of my UI. Then I will be like, well, then you have to fix your UI. That's a skill. Like that's technically an indirect skill issue. Also, Dreaming of Shadow. So that's how you do it. I've always asked myself that. I have a video that is like, from like I released it on the day Endwalker launched. Where I demonstrate how to fill in keybinds. And I just do it like raw, because I'm like, well, with that new expansion, I'm gonna play Summoner, started a Summoner, and I need to fill in my new hotbars for this newly reworked job that is Summoner, and I also have to fill them in for Sage and Reaper, so I might as well demonstrate in a video how, like, what is my thought process for that? How do I do that? And in that video, for the whole duration, in the bottom left, there is like an image that shows my control scheme. Which includes a sideways view of my mouse. I'll say Anthony Dayo. I even had my hotbars as 3x4 to match the mouse. Nice. I rarely use the back half of my thumb grid on my mouse. I use the front 6 buttons. These 3. You can see here, press 1, press 2, press 3, press 4, press 5, press 6. And then I believe 7 and 10 are bonus action 1, and 8 and 11 is bonus action 2. And then I sometimes use 9 and 12 as like a voice activation button. And I have them pairwise because when it gets that far back, I find it a little difficult to hit exactly. And I don't need more buttons, so I'll sacrifice the additional buttons for reliability, I guess. I would say the difficulty of that, Boovamet, is that when you just get into a game like Final Fantasy XIV, you have no idea what you actually need. It's impossible to know what information you actually need, where you need things to be, what keybinds are smart. You figure that out as you go. But the problem is, if you don't change anything, like you get into the game and then like you play a bunch, then you might be biased towards sticking with what you already have because now you've played the game for 300 hours with that setup. So changing it will be a setback. Like, for instance, if I changed where my buffs were on my screen, I just moved them to somewhere else on the screen permanently, then I would probably spend at least the next week of play. Every time I need to check my buffs, I would go up there, find nothing, maybe look here instead, and then look where they're now. And then you have to decide whether you CBA dealing with that, you know, transfer period. I mentioned that when I played WoW, I used to have a really like old school scheme where like, you know, the classic, my unit frame with my health and important information up here, and then like to the right is my target, and to the right is like my focus target and things like that. Like everything was just off in Narnia. All that crucial information just off into the stratosphere. I had to look away from my character to see anything useful. When I finally went, you know what? I need to get a better UI. I need to fix that. I installed a whole new, like, you know, add-on UI with what is as you do in WoW, and deleted the old one. Like, just took everything, threw it in the trash, cleared the trash can, and just was like, we're not going back to that. Because if I kept it, I would have probably within like a couple hours gone, nah, actually, I feel more comfortable with the old one. I'm just gonna use the old one. And then just be stuck with the garbage that I was dealing with. So I straight up just deleted the path back. And that can sometimes be what it takes. Flamir says, is there a way to change the default modifier keys? Instead of them being Control, Shift, and Alt, can you change them to be something else? For 14? Like, how do you mean? Like, are you asking whether you can switch which modifier key hits what button? Or are you asking whether you could change it so that your modifier key was like X? What do you mean? There. For example, instead of using Alt plus whatever, I wanted to do M4 plus whatever. Some games recognize, a lot of games I guess, recognize mouse 4 as a button of its own. And that might, you know, mean no on that one. Some games, don't believe 14 is one of them. Some games allow you to use, like, well, you have to press 2 buttons for a thing to happen, which essentially is the same as having a modifier key, right? It's just that the button press only works if you're pressing both buttons simultaneously. What you could do is, Flamer, what you could do is you could just, like, if you have some mice, for instance, most MMO mice have this, you just go into the software for the mouse itself and change it so that the mouse button that is currently mouse 4 is changed to press Alt. And then when you press mouse 4 and another button, then it effectively does the same as pressing mouse 4. Oh, sorry, pressing... it does the same as effectively if mouse 4 was your modifier. That's typically how you have to do it, I think. That's how I would do it. That's also the reason why you can see, like, some people will get an MMO mouse and hope that they can just, you know... They don't want to keybind their mouse buttons to buttons on the keyboard. They want the whole mouse to be like an additional, like, 12 new keys that correspond to nothing on the keyboard. That's usually not possible. But you can just keybind the buttons on the mouse to correspond to buttons on the keyboard. That's very, very easily done most of the time. That would be my suggestion. Just bind the button on the mouse to a modifier if you can. Inverse popcorn. Hope you're doing well, Faust. Say White Fang. It could be worse. My first MMO mouse was before they had figured out that, oh, just make a thumb grid. I had like this ergonomic WoW mouse from SteelSeries, which with lots of buttons on it. I think it had like 15 or something like that, but they were all over the place. That idea was not bad. The problem is that they didn't actually allow you to properly customize where, or like what button did what. In the settings, you could bind a button on the mouse to do a specific thing in WoW. So, to try and give an example, you could go into the menu and say, this weird button here, let's just call it 2. When I press this, it opens my bags. Bags plural. That means that when you press that button, the mouse will attempt to press the default keybind for opening all of your bags, which is Shift B. If you change the keybind to something else, it will not open all of your bags, because it is just pressing Shift B. And if you just set it to open backpack, then it will just press B. And there was no way to change that. Like, the best you could do is that I believe you could make it write a message. The problem is that the way that that would work is that that would be press enter, write message, press enter. So it was really convoluted. You just had to know what the default keybinds were to things. So if you want, like, if you wanted, when you press 2, use Heroic Strike. Then you have to keybind Heroic Strike to Shift B. And then bind 2, like on the mouse, to open bags. And then they would match. It was really stupid. It was not great, but hey, I guess that we figured out how MMO mice should be with this extra research. It sounds like a little bit too tailor-made of a tool. Yes. But let's just say that the packaging of the mouse had World of Warcraft on it. The software of the mouse had World of Warcraft in it. It was literally made as the WoW mouse, so it made sense that they specialized it that much. It's just funny that in retrospect, its over-specialization was a detriment. Void. Delicious void. Wow, mouse. Me when I see a mouse. Wow. Amazing. It's a mouse. But yeah, that is essentially I feel like in a little bit of a roundabout and too galaxy brain way, and honestly more in hindsight, I do feel like me using if you copy it wholesale, bad control scheme for just keyboard, I feel like it's pretty smart for the learning process of a potential new player. They might copy my hotbars exactly and be like, this is bad. And then they find out, as a result, what works for them. I think that would be a pretty solid end result. And they go, oh, yeah, that doesn't work for me, and fix it for themselves. Exactly, Haunted Mask. I do sometimes, as I think I have mentioned, I do sometimes get comments that are like, how could you possibly play with a control scheme like that? I even once had a comment that was like, I'm not gonna take advice from someone who doesn't even know how to do their keybinds well, and I'm like, I use an MMO mouse. I'm like, oh, my bad. That was a funny comment. And then they had a lesson in not being too presumptuous. Still learned something. Did I ever mention that I wanted to be a teacher at some point? Thank you, Boomermid. Hey, Agisora and Brontom, hope you're doing well. That's also true, Boomermid. I essentially ended up being teaching about things and games I like. Xoro says, I really had to arrange my hotbars for tanks at least, so that way I have them all organized after I bought a mouse. Investigation on shift, single target and AoE on 1 to 3, 4 to 6, and everything else on control. You can also see there's some system here for me. On a lot of jobs, I have gap closers around here. And I have mitigation around here. Like that, there are some systems. I have mentioned before that one of my bigger problems coming into 14 is that in 14, I got used to 1 to 3 for combos. 4 is the AoE button. But in World of Warcraft, Shift 2 was my interrupt button. And Shift 4 was commonly the button that I would put a stun on. And because healers often wouldn't have an interrupt, I would put Shift 2 as my, you know, Ishuna button. And depending on the mix and match, if something had a, like, if I had a, if I had somehow a Dispel, an Ishuna, and an interrupt, then, you know, Ishuna would go on Shift 4, or the interrupt would go on Shift 4. Like, I would just use those two buttons interchangeably, because the probability of a character having an interrupt, a stun, and Ishuna all at once was relatively small. That was not very common. So it kind of worked out. Now, there's a problem with that when my combo scheme then, you know, goes 1 to 3 for combos, and 4 is the AoE button. Which is the reason why stun and interrupt has, like, been sent, like, away. Because I'm like, I don't know where to put that. And having consistent schemes like that often makes it easier to pick up a new job. Like, an interesting example, I think, is if you decide to watch that video I mentioned where I go over my thought process for keybinds, you'll notice that a lot of my solutions for Sage is, well, on Scholar I have it for this button, so I'll just put this, the identical button there. Why do you have Karakoli on 8? Because Sacred Soil is on 8. Why do you have Lustrate on 2? It's because, sorry, why do you have Ryokoli on 2? That's because Lustrate is on 2. No worries, Ilana. Flamir says, you made a video recently on Involved mode. Are you excited for it? Do you think it's going to make the slap people are saying, or it won't change the game that much? I know it will change a lot. And it's going to change things that I myself have said needed to be changed. For a long time. As I mentioned in multiple, or at least in one of my 3 Evolved mode videos, ages ago, I made a video called something like the 2-minute curse. And that was like, I think, early mid-Endwalker. At that point, I had already determined and decided, no, the 2-minute burst is bad for the game. That was my opinion. And Evolved mode is removing the 2-minute burst. So it will definitely make a big splash in some form or another. Thank you, Ardell. The 2-minute curse is also really a really old video. I think it's from ASMR Kai era. Cloud says, I don't know, I like the buffs, and I think it'll be boring without buffs. Let's let it happen, and let's see before we judge it too hard. It might be that the changes make each job more interesting in other means. I think the thing that I have noted and kept repeatedly pointing back to as a big win. Okay, hope you're doing well. Is that for the jobs, for the DPS jobs that we have seen, the thing that they have now that make them stand out is defensive options instead of offensive options. And I think that's interesting. I mentioned that in my 2-minute burst evolved mode video. And an offensive buff kinda just like, because they have to be similar to match, because you using the offensive buff means that for everyone else to be able to actually utilize it very effectively, it has to be somewhat like similar to everyone else's damage buff. And that kind of makes them all similarly lame. You have a buff for 20 seconds that make you do more damage. Enjoy. Which is really boring. But defensive cooldowns have a tendency, just in 14, I feel like more in games in general that play with these kind of ideas, but especially in 14, it feels like the developers are way more adventurous with defensive buffs. Then they're suddenly okay with doing something really wacky. And on top of that, because of the way we tend to interact with defensive tools, I feel like a job having a distinctly special defensive button is more likely to affect the party in a way where you actually feel, oh, there's a this job in my party instead of a that job. As I give an example in the video, having a Dragoon in your party, like if Dragoon actually ends up making it to live in Evercold with like a 90% mitigation sky high, like if they actually let that slide and they have that, you will have, like, if no one else gets something like that, you will have savage boss strategies that go, well, if you have a Dragoon in your party, you just have them soak that tower. Just have them soak this, like, if the stack goes on them, you just let them solo it. And yeah, also as Metricon says, 14 has been kind of distinct in having this whole thing with coordinated raid buffs. Like World of Warcraft almost broke in half when they introduced one specialization that had like synergy like that. They basically completely broke the balance of the game because they had one specialization that kind of worked like Dancer. Kind of. So it's not surprising that 14 is having trouble, like, having the game hang together and be balanced and not have the jobs become too similar. How did it break the game? Let's just say that the presence of this new specialization in a party could buff the damage of everyone else too much. There was like within days, I believe, there was a clear of a current raid boss, where they had like three unholy Death Knights, which is a DPS, and like 17 or like as many as possible of the new specialization. And because these buffs stacked, because of how, you know, multiplicative stacking works, those 2 or 3 unholy Death Knights, was it 4, did more damage than an entire raid team could. Which, remember, 20 players in WoW. There's also the part that just because of the existence of this specialization, WoW had to, like, go into the dusty tomes known as, how does 14 handle that? In WoW, in the past, they just had to worry about how much DPS does your specialization do. And then maybe have some utility option or a raid buff you provide for the team. But that's, like, just a side note. With this new specialization, our DPS and things like that had to be considered as a factor when comparing, which they never had to before. And there's a difference there because in WoW it's normal to have a DPS meter on screen, and it requires more calculation time to convert DPS to RDPS. Sally says, fun fact, WoW had raid buffs before, but they were basically mutually exclusive to such an extreme degree that you couldn't stack them like we can. No, not fully correct, Sally. So basically, by World of Warcraft standards, a raid buff is what you would know as protect in Final Fantasy XIV, which is a thing that they removed. In 14 olden days, when you started a duty, you had to wait for the white mage to put protect on you, so you could get a defensive boost. The only raid buff, in the way we think raid buffs in 14, the only raid buff World of Warcraft has is Bloodlust or Heroism, depending on faction. The Alliance has Heroism. It's the same effect. It's just a visual distinction. And that is a massive haste boost for like 40 seconds. But it gives you a debuff that persists through death, by the way, that says you cannot benefit from Bloodlust again for 10 minutes. You know, like how Blue Mages self-destruct and then they can't do that again for 10 minutes. Yeah, essentially, as Kat says, World of Warcraft's equivalent of, like, World of Warcraft's raid buffs, as they think raid buffs, is the equivalent to party bonus in 14. It's just that they were different, right? Like, certain specializations, certain classes bring a specific raid buff. So their mere presence in the party means that you have this effect. And that's also how you generally end up with, well, we need one of each class in a raid, because otherwise you're missing out on a specific buff. Doesn't matter that bringing 5 warlocks, I don't know, does more damage. You kind of need one of every class first, and then you might need specific specializations on top of that, and then suddenly you have a pretty varied team. But in the past, just to be fair, to like give a little bit of credit to what credit's due, in the past, and I don't know if they have it now, but World of Warcraft has had individual buffs. Like, way back when, I think it was like Mr. Pandaria, Warlocks could give one person in the raid 3% haste, called Dark Intent. When the person got a proc, I can't remember if it was when they crit it or something, the Warlock would also get 3% haste for a little bit. I'm getting to that, Ilana. And similarly, mages had focused magic, which did the same thing, but with crit. And druids had symbiosis, which was one of the most insane single abilities in the game. You use symbiosis on someone, they get a druid ability a weakened version of a druid ability depending on what class or specialization they are. And the druid, in turn, gets a weakened version of an ability from that class, depending on what specialization the druid is. So, for example, a druid might be able to give a tank a slightly weaker version of the druid's own major defensive cooldown. Like, imagine if you could just give your co-tank access to, like, they just also have access to Guardian. You know, Paladin's Guardian. But it's only 400 potency barrier, and the mitigation is only 20%. But you just also have that. Just for free. The key is you could only use Symbiosis on one person. You can only use Focused Magic on one person. You can only use Dark Intent on one person. So, you know, people were like, no, pick me! Pick me! Give me Dark Intent. I want the haste. Give me Focused Magic. I want the crit and all that. And then, of course, there was Power Infusion, which I believe might still exist now. I'm not 100% sure. Which was a priest ability that gave, I believe, 20% extra damage output for like 20 seconds. To someone. Could be themselves. Could be someone else. But because priests can be healers, a healer that had access to Power Infusion, just give that free damage. I believe it also increased healing done, but Boomhead says, pretty sure it does. I was around WoW players talking about PI a few weeks ago. PI being the shorthand for Power Infusion. That could be classic WoW players. Dark Shadow says, you can give it to a player and you get it yourself at the same. Oh, they made it so that you just share it now. That's pretty crazy. And hey, Madokishi. Dark Shadow says I play a lot of Priest. Yeah, in my defense, Priest is one of the classes that I've just never been able to stick with. For some reason, Priest and Shaman are like the two that I've never ever played at max level. And it's not because, like, I mean, I would be like, oh, that's a really awesome thing. Maybe I should try that. And then I just wouldn't stick with it. I think, like, the specializations they have are cool. I just couldn't stick with it for some reason. It also didn't help that I usually almost always ended up being a tank. It's gonna be difficult to be a tank main as a shaman or a priest, right? They can't tank. Run! Shaman tank in Season of Discovery. Oh yeah, that was an option. I almost got into Season of Discovery because Warlock could tank. Because I have mentioned before, I love Warlock. Then I discovered that the way you unlock it is kind of jank. And then I was like, you know what, never mind, I don't care. Never mind. So now the EX1 one? I believe so, yes. Yes. Evangelish Mandalorian. Isn't it kind of BS that 2 minutes CDs align when a boss does nothing. Like 2 minutes happen at Light Rampant and fourfold in P8S at Gales too. It happens all the time. The thing is, I agree that it feels like the 2 minute burst kinda aligns with where the boss is actually really active, but I can point to some sequence where it's like, you know, the boss happens to slow down the big mechanic it's doing exactly so that everyone can do their burst. And that's also kind of what I pointed out in my video on the Evolved Mode 2 minute burst, is that, like, I just grabbed, like, out of a hat, went, I feel like I noticed that there was a pretty convenient time to burst on Lindworm. And on Lindworm, as I mentioned in my video, the boss becomes untargetable at like 3 minutes 30 or something like that, like on the dot, which is precisely timed so that if you do a pretty classic opener, you can do your odd minute burst and the boss will be back for the even minute burst. I'll say Repticom, hope you're doing well. How Fusion still exists. Right, and Dark Shadow said that it's shared now. It's pretty crazy. I certainly hope, now that we're on the topic of all of this, I hope very much that with Evolved Mode, that they don't make Scholar and Sage identical. Take this opportunity where you're overhauling them and go, you know what? No, Scholar is like this and Sage is like that. They don't have to be the same. I really hope. Because it's such a clear opportunity to do that. Shanks says, still think energy drain is on the chopping block on removed actions. It would surprise me. I'll say, I've said, I do believe I've already said, if Physic on Summoner survives Evolved Mode, then, I mean, I have to tip my hat to the devs because they are definitely memers at that point. Hey, Lex. What about Scathe? Oh, would also be hilarious, but I'm just saying that I do believe we have evidence that that Summoner Physic, like, literally admitted from devs that Physic is in the game for Summoner and works the way it does because they think it is funny. They can make them fill opposite roles. Scholar can increase people's health pools with shields, and Sage can decrease people's health pools by not healing at all. Come on, man. Lex is testing how long the farm takes again, but this time with the current update? Nah. Basically, Lex, I just noticed that I have like 6 jobs that still need to do book step. I'm like, that's really tedious. And then I'm like, I could spend the time in something like walk and talk, just doing book steps. And then we have, like, sometimes when there's nothing to talk about, we have something funny to talk about as a result of that, instead of just nothing. And this is so casual and so background noise that I don't feel like it means that we can't talk about other stuff. I'll say make some time. So that's basically it. I'm not trying to rush the books. We're just doing them slowly in the background. So he says, they debated hard on removing reses from Summoner and Red Mage, and someone asked about Physic because of that. And Sally says then that's how we got the meme answer. Right. This is solely still here because it's a meme to them. They would have removed it years ago if it wasn't. They said so going into Dawntrail. Bronson says, you know, I thought about this the other day. Why isn't energy drain tied to the fairy gauge instead? Because if it was tied to the fairy gauge, then Ether Pact would now be moot. Could you imagine? Now that they're explicitly limiting themselves to 16 buttons, they don't have much room for meme buttons. I guess you're right. But didn't White Mage still have repose? Not saying that that's a meme button, I'm just saying that that would be like that. There are certain buttons on jobs that are things that we're like, it's really useful in something like Deep Dungeons. But in the main like meat of the content that players do, it's basically one step removed from useless. Asymmetric, I believe Bard also had foot and leg raise. Exactly. So it wouldn't surprise me if they leave some buttons that they're like, well, it doesn't hurt that they're there. That's okay. Nox says how far we got. Let's see. We are on the Netherfire book. We started on Skyfire 1. We did Skyfire 1, Skyfire 2, Skywind 2, and now we're on Netherfire 1. We're this one and one more book away from finishing the book step for Warrior. What's Dark Knight's meme button? Not all jobs get one. Isymmetricon says the layouts they showed had roll actions in the 16. That's fair. I do believe that there was at least one job with the 17th button. Don't remember which one, but I do believe that they had, one of them had like one more button. Ether Pact kind of sucks. You're right, Soteria also kind of sucks. But they have their users. Anyway. Hey, is Crab Galaxy still here? Yeah. Just double checking. Crab Galaxy is Cobalt, yes? Yes. Do you mind if I share the video you made real quick of you drawing Kai? Do you mind if we check that out on stream? Did it have music? Or is it just no sound? Nope. End product. Amazing. I really liked how the pointer stick was one of the first things that got drawn, it felt like. Yeah, thank you so much, Crab Galaxy. Says, what are the polls on YouTube for, by the way? Upcoming video? Yes. In near the end of Endwalker, like we're talking, I believe I released some of them like days before Dawntrail released. I made polls asking like what people's opinions were on the hardest jobs in Endwalker. And I think it was an interesting topic to revisit. Did people's opinions change? Did stuff change? And I have my opinion on what's hardest. And interestingly, like I feel like my ranking is close to what the player base would feel. But it's a lot easier to argue my case if I have the data that, yeah, people agreed with me to back it up. But I don't even care about that. I'm just going to talk about what can make jobs difficult or easy. And then I'll just have the backing of a poll. to add more intrigue and interest to it, and I hope people will find it interesting. But yes, it is for videos. Rainrope says, I understand this is a stupid take, but I low-key like having a lot of buttons, and even though I'm optimistic about Evolve mode, I am sad I'll be pressing fewer buttons. I don't know. I've played enough, like, games in the style of what 14 is going for, because there's a bunch, and I care about what meaning the buttons add more than how many buttons there are. Which you can also kind of tell in some of the content that I've made, like some of the videos I've made. Like, I have suggested, for instance, if to make paladins have less buttons, you could just combine like Expiation and Circle of Scorn. That's one less OGCD. You could stack them on top of each other if that's what you want. Doesn't make any difference to me. I just see OGCD that does damage. Do we need 4 of those? And yeah, exactly as Kat says, there are characters in Fellowship that have, like, characters in Fellowship have exactly the same amount of buttons across the board. Doesn't matter what you are. They all end up at the same amount of buttons. Except some of them have, like, buttons that do more things. And some that are, like, more stacked with functionality. And it kind of comes down to, like, how it feels to do things. Like, yeah, exactly, Zav. It's like, the reason why I'm like, it matters that, for instance, Circle of Scorn and Expiation, if you stack those together, that's one less OGCD, and it can matter. Like, if Paladin only had one OGCD attack there, and then they have Intervene, then they would be more flexible, slightly more flexible in their burst, because they wouldn't have that GCD where they go Expiation, Circle of Scorn. They could just go the combined button and the defensive if that's what they want to do. Like, it does matter a little bit. But those are the kinds of things where, like, that's when I'm like, it adds meaning in that way. But there are other places where it feels like there's a lot of buttons to do one thing, right? A lot of the combos, essentially, if Dark Knight, let's say that Dark Knight, like, just for simplicity's sake, just real quick thought here. Let's say that Dark Knight's gauge went to 300 instead of 100, and then the spenders cost 150. Just for the simplicity of math, right? And then every GCD, every 1 to 3 combo gave you 20 gauge. You're essentially still building 40% of a spender per per 3 combo steps. They also make them give 200 MP each, and then make every GCD heal for 100 potency. Just all 3 of them just heals 100 potency. At that point, your filler could just be Soul Eater, because it does 1/3 of the whole combo's effect every time you press it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm aware that it adds a little bit more, that you build up to the step 3, and that it makes a difference. But as far as I'm concerned, whether it was one way or the other wouldn't change that much for me. And yeah, exactly, Rainrope. That is also something that comes up a lot. Is like, it's a very minor thing, but having 1-1-1-1-1 combos means that you don't have to remember where you are in your combo when you branch off to do other stuff. That's not like extreme skill expression, though. Exactly. What usually happens in those conversations is that some people will point out that that is technically something you have to keep track of, and then players that are doing like a lot harder content will be like, is that difficult? No, but it's like, while you're spinning all the, like, keeping track of all these other things, it's something you could be like, oops. And it's just one button press. But yeah, my point is just that that is also a way to do it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm more interested in what the button does And there, for that reason, something like Hard Slash, its effect is it enables you to use Siphon Strike. Siphon Strike's effect is that it gives you MP and enables you to use Soul Eater. Soul Eater's effect is that it gives you health and blood gauge. And of course, all three do damage. But you can see how there's like an escalating effect. Why not just make your filler do stuff? Just make your filler do cool stuff. And then make the thing you build to more interesting. But that's a different way of design. And I mean, I'm playing 14 because I like it, right? So there's no reason for me to like demand that the whole game be changed to this. It's just I can see how both ways could work. Anyway, we got like roughly 3 books finished because we started at a book that was about as finished as the one we have now. And I feel like we covered some interesting topics. Last time I tried to do something different for a walk and talk, it ended up completely overshadowing all other topics. This time I feel like we got to talk about a lot of different things. We also talked a little bit about Relic Grind, but the majority was anything. I think this is a good way to do it, looking forward. But, on that note, if you'd like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link right there in the chat. There you'll find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is coming up in the coming days. It's usually updated Sunday or Monday. You'll also find the announcement room with links to videos and streams and put them out. And if you grab the reminder roll in the roller announcement room, you get a notification whenever I post video or stream. So the next run around 15 minutes before stream starts, you can catch it right when you go live. And if you'd like to support the channel more directly, you can like over on the YouTube side of things. It helps with algorithms and such. You can also subscribe, become a member, super chat, cheer, all that goodness. And if you don't like any of that, there's also the Ko-Fi links that I will post right there in the chat. It all helps support me and the channel directly so I can focus on doing stuff like this with all of you. So thanks so much for the support. But that will be it from me tonight. So let's see if we can raid somebody. That is some wild variety we have over here. We could check in on Reggie. Let's go with Reggie. He's also doing something pretty chill. Cool. But on that note, good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where in the world, and hope to see you all very soon. Bye-bye!